photos. The next environmental piece is the native plant restoration. And at the end of this presentation, I might give Brian Wilson a few minutes just to talk about his studies that he's found. He's gone in and mapped out the entire park and the entire native species and invasive species, flora and fauna, or plant habitats. It's pretty impressive. That work is still underway, and this report will not be approved until that piece is completed. But I do want to just kind of give you an idea of what an invasive species is, and this is a U.S. Forest Service definition. I have the experience of working with the U.S. Forest Service over the past 5 years from a previous employer, so I'm very sensitive to the environment and protecting the ecosystem. So here's what they have to say. A species is invasive when it is both non-native to the ecosystem in which it is found and capable of causing environmental, economic, or human harm. Invasive species often compete so successfully in new ecosystems that they displace the native species and disrupt important ecosystem processes. All right? So it can negatively impact the ecosystem if we don't address it. And Trees Atlanta has the experience to do that. And that will be a part of the project, is to restore the ecosystem. All right? And so in this report, we'll include all the mapping data that we've gathered today. Tree canopy, as I mentioned, our sole purpose of doing the tree survey is really to preserve, restore, and protect the tree canopy that's out there. We have identified a few dead trees, a few hazardous trees, and those trees are already being removed. And I can promise you that at the end of the day, when we finish this project, your tree canopy is going to be greater than what you started with. We will make sure that we replace every tree that we have taken down. Now, to that point, taking down, I have determined from this study, and we've done a trail layout, that there are only 5, count them, 5 out of over 800 specimen trees. These aren't even specimen trees. 5 trees that we're removing, and they're all deemed to be in poor condition, meaning they are a hazard. We are not removing any healthy trees on this project. And that is pretty phenomenal, truly, from my experience in working on trails. Phenomenal. We have certified arborists that will be on the project until completion. And they are providing us with the tools to make sure that we protect the root systems of these trees when we improve the trails. There are proven technologies that are used all over the United States and here locally in urban conditions where you have large oak trees that line sidewalks. In park systems, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise to do this right. And I can promise you, I don't know of any other firm out there that has taken the time to develop this thorough of a study on a park project, truly. So tree canopy, let's see here, champion trees. Hopefully you guys have had the opportunity of walking the site with Trees of Atlanta and seeing the 5 champion trees that are in the park. And that's pretty amazing. There are 5 champion trees. Those 5 champion trees will be protected. We are not impacting any of those trees. And the good news is we're going to showcase those in a very classy, interpretive manner at the end of this project. So you get a little of education out of the deal. All right. And so, talked about champion trees, plant restoration, path surfaces. We have done a thorough investigation of path surfaces, and what you can see here, these are your existing conditions. You have mulched paths, which wash away in floods, and it's just a high maintenance product. Yes, it's inexpensive. Yes, it's natural, but it washes away. You have very narrow 1 foot wide paths in certain areas. You have rubberized paths. So we've taken a look at all path system products. All right, so we've looked at, excuse me. We've taken a look at the rubberized surface. It's expensive. It's not really that natural looking. Mulch, it washes away. It's not really conducive to floodplain environments. We've taken a look at a product called it's aggregate material. It's porous, and it has a stabilizer mixed in with it. It's called Slate Scape. It's quarried locally within Georgia, and it is proven to be an acceptable product to use in floodplains. And this is what they used in the park next to where I live. And it is amazing. I even have taken the time to talk to the operations manager, the maintenance person on staff, the director, and talk to him about that. And I said, listen, I'm working on a project at Memorial Park, and I want to make the best choice for the community on path materials. I said, if you had to do it all over again, I know that you're within a floodplain, you're within the stream buffers, would you use this material? And he said, absolutely. It is the perfect product. It's porous. And I'm going to show you a picture of it. Bear with me for 1 second. It's in this report. I think it's later on down the road, but it is a natural product. It looks like just a granite fines, but it's got a stabilizer mixed in. It's porous, and it's perfect. It's perfect. It will not wash away. And so that's what we're considering for the interior portion of the park, the nature trail, if you will. On the exterior portion of the park, we are considering either an asphalt or concrete material because of the durability. And this is outside of the stream buffer, so you're allowed to use a more durable hard surface like concrete or asphalt. And the cool thing about concrete is over time, nature takes over and it creates a really nice natural tint. Very nice natural color. So you don't even have to put a color admixer in there. Just nature takes over. And it's cost effective. So along the perimeter boundaries of the park, what we have determined the most environmentally sensitive and cost-effective approach is to provide a concrete surface. And that concrete surface is not going to be right up against the roadway. We're going to provide a natural buffer. And that buffer may meander based on site constraints. But we want to make it inviting. And we're proposing a 5-foot wide trail. And these trails will have connection points, ADA curb cuts, accessible curb cuts, so that all users can use the park. Everyone can access the trail system. And that is a regulatory requirement, believe it or not. We have to stay within the regulatory boundaries. Now,
where will it cross the bridge on Howell Mill? You gonna add to that bridge?
We are not planning on any improvements along Howell Mill. There's an existing sidewalk there. So we're tying into that sidewalk. We will make sure that the curb cuts are brought up to ADA standards, and we'll have crossings there. We are proposing a sidewalk that will connect from the park along Wesley to Howell Mill, and that will be in front of the homes there. So, that is something that we are proposing, a new sidewalk system, which will provide connectivity around the entire park. And I promise you that we will be in touch with those homeowners, and that will be coordinated appropriately. That is important. And then, as I mentioned, on the interior of the park, we're proposing that natural surface. Now, drainage. As I mentioned, that one of the goals of this project is to address drainage. We plan to do it through curb improvements. All right, so we have done a thorough investigation of all your curbs around this park, more so than I've ever seen. And we've got concrete curbs along Woodley, Woodworks, excuse me. Thank you for correcting me. And then we have stone curbs along Wesley. And then we've got a combination of asphalt and rubber in certain areas. You know, and you can see in some of these pictures, it varies really. But what we have found is that the stone curbs have washed away over time. And I've got a good photo of that. It's right here. And it's created spalling in the asphalt. And, you know, and there's a certain area where the city actually came back and tried to replace stone curb. Didn't really work out so well. So, you know, it's an attractive material, but it's not mitigating drainage, and it's not addressing the stormwater problems that you have. So our proposal, and we've looked at all different materials, concrete, granite, etc. Our proposal is to come back in with a City of Atlanta, it's called a City of Atlanta standard granite curb. And let me see if I can find it real quick for you. And so it's this photo up on the middle of left of the page. And I think it's a nice compromise. You know, it's in keeping with the neighborhood. It's granite, natural material. You know, that's most important. You know, it's a little expensive, but you know what? It's not any more expensive than the stone curbs. Actually, it's a more cost-effective approach than the rubble stone that you have out there now, and it's going to mitigate stormwater properly. The other thing I wanted to mention about the granite curbs is I spoke to the historic preservation person at the Urban Design Council, City of Atlanta, and I asked him, I said, if we remove this stone curb, is that a historic, you know, element? And he said, it's not. However, if you do remove it, see if you can reuse that material in the park. And I said, perfect. We've already considered it. So, in areas that we have drainage problems within the park and we can't really build natural trails, we want to provide connections and crossings. We're considering some small footbridges. Very small areas that we've kind of identified. And within those footbridges, what a cool idea to be able to reuse that stone material and create a nice little foundation for those footbridges. You know, and there's many other uses for this material. Little stone monuments, signs, etc. So, you know, we've considered all aspects.
Can you tell us where one of these footbridges might go
Yes.
in the park?
Yeah, I'm going to show you that in a minute, the map that we've prepared. So we studied all aspects, from paths to curbs to drainage to trees to streams to plant ecosystems. Oh my goodness, I have never seen such a thorough design. And I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke, but I promise you, you're not going to get this from any other park project. We've looked at trail design standards and reference manuals. You know, while we do have the experience of doing this, I think it's important to let you guys know, you know, this is what we typically reference when we're looking at trail design. One of those is americantrails.org, and they provide 4 points that I want to bring up. Safety, connectivity, context. Is it appropriate for the area that you're planning a trail, you know, you're planning a trail environmentally? And does it provide for a variety of users, all ages and all abilities? So that's most important, those 4 pieces. And then we've listed out a couple other standards within that are most important, like the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. I've also included in here several trails that you personally can go see and visit that we included in this report. We've got photos of those trails, and I'm just going to list those for you. So I mentioned the Roswell Riverside Trail. That happens to be near my house, and I think it's a perfect application for this park. Little Nancy Creek, right down the street, is within a stream buffer. It's got that aggregate material. The Tallulah Gorge Trails, we visited that. That has the rubberized surface, similar to what you have out there now. Lanesford Park, which is a woodland trail application. Morningside Nature Preserve, and there's several others. we will be happy to give you plenty of resources to visit. Okay, so this is actually this picture on the left-hand side, that's the image of the aggregate with the stabilizer that I had suggested. And this is at Roswell Riverside Park. It's very natural. You could see, you could put it right next to trees. And it's an appropriate material for this project. On the right-hand side is a photo of a concrete sidewalk. And this is what we would propose along the perimeter of the project. A hard surface that meets ADA requirements and also helps to mitigate stormwater. Alright. Permitting, regulatory requirements. We've listed out all of the regulatory requirements for this project. And let me just tell you, if you've ever improved anything at your house, you understand the lengthy process that you have to go through in order to construct anything. And it is lengthy. It's gonna be probably an 8 to 12 month permitting process for this project. So we'll meet with the City of Atlanta Office of Park Design, which we've already started. We've engaged them from day one. They walked the site with us and they've been involved. The City of Atlanta Urban Design Commission, we have to meet with them. I've already had a conversation with the historic preservation person. City of Atlanta Bureau of Buildings, we have to go run through the permitting through that department. Department of Watershed Management, and the EPD. These are all the agencies that we, as designers, have to consider when we design a trail. To recap our findings and recommendations for this project, I'm just gonna kind of go through this with you. We plan to remove all of the dead, dying, and hazardous trees within the park. We will replace those trees with new trees. And like I said, we will have a larger tree canopy when we are done with this project. We will limb up any trees that have dead limbs on them that create hazards to pedestrians. We're not making any radical changes, I can promise you. We are simply removing any dead wood on the trees. So if you heard otherwise, I'm here to dispel those rumors, truly. So that's the tree canopy piece of it. Any trees that we work around when we're building trails, we've got techniques called root bridging, root pruning, fertilizer treatments. Yeah, there is a plethora of information out there that's available that are proven techniques and that we use on a daily basis. Second point, the second recommendation is to remove the invasive species within the park. Let's restore the ecosystem. That's truly what we're trying to do here. We are being as transparent as we possibly can. Recommendation number 3 is to improve the existing perimeter trail with a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk. We'll replace the existing curbs where we have drainage problems with the City of Atlanta standard granite curb. So that'll be part of the same improvement along the perimeter of the property. Just a minute. Next improvement is to take those existing stone curbs that you have and reuse them within the park. Let's create some neat features out of those curbs. Let's salvage them and reuse them. We plan to improve the interior trails with the 5-foot wide porous material I spoke of. And then, and let me go back to that. We recommended a larger width trail. And I know that that is a very sensitive subject. You know, ideally, you would probably want to have it a little larger, but we understand the context of the neighborhood. And so we have compromised to a 5-foot wide trail. We think that that will be appropriate for this park. Typically, you'll see them at 8, 10, feet, even more. But we're focusing on the pedestrian here. We're not making it accessible for bicyclists. Please refrain it very much. We will make minor repairs to the existing rubberized trail. We'll provide interpretive signage to the park. And then those footbridges, let me show you where those will be. All right, so the blue triangle, and I apologize if you can't really see it, but the blue triangle, let me orient you to the side. The left-hand side is Howell Mill. The solid blue line, that is Wesley. And then just due north of that blue line is a blue triangle. And that is bisecting an open field on the left-hand side, on the west side, and a wooded trail on the right-hand side. There's an existing footbridge there that I believe the Boy Scouts built. Yeah, and Cub Scouts, is that correct? Okay. And we certainly will be mindful of that. We know a lot of hard work went into that. So we may have to make some improvements to make it ADA accessible, but we'll be mindful of those improvements that have already gone on. So that's an area where we will have a footbridge or an improved version of that. And then the other area is over by the playground. There is a small dirt trail that crosses a drainage swale. And within that trail, we are proposing a small footbridge there as well to provide connections, improve the user experience. So those are the two footbridges. We may have to put in a boardwalk in certain areas. We haven't quite determined where that boardwalk or the limits of that boardwalk will be. But as we get into the construction documents of this project, which we haven't started yet, we will determine where those boardwalks may be needed. But that's an environmental thing. And it is dependent on really where we have the most drainage problems and that stay wet. So, those are the proposed recommendations that we have determined from this 9-month, 8-month long exercise that we've done and prepared for you guys. Costs, we've developed a cost summary. This project will be a little over $1 million. However, as part of this project, you are getting tree care and restoration, period. Tree care, restoration. Invasive species mitigation. Ecosystem restoration. You're getting trail improvements, improved connectivity, and the good news is this feasibility study has been previously funded through the Park Pride grant. And I know that Conservancy will do a great job of raising the money to build this park. And they have done a great job today, just getting the word out. And they care. I promise you, they care. So in conclusion, it is feasible to build parks, or to build trails within your park, to improve those trails. You have existing trails, we just want to improve them along with improving the ecosystem. And before I turn it over to a Q&A, I would like to see if Brian, are you? Brian, would you talk a little bit about the invasive species before we,
Yes.
if you could, yes. This is Brian Williams from Trees Atlanta. And he just concluded his study on the native.
So I have been out there this past week, which was a terrific week to go out there with the rain and everything else. But we just got brought on at the beginning of October, so I'm kind of in a little bit of a time crunch here, but I am getting it done for y'all. So I went out, I looked at all 37 acres out there. I mapped every plant that was not native that I saw out there. In a nutshell, there are 24 different species of things that in some category or form we would consider an invasive, some worse than others. The big four that you're going to find everywhere, kudzu, Chinese privet, English ivy, Japanese hops, they're all out there to some varying degree. Kudzu is actually not that bad, not as bad as it is in many other parks, but the privet and the ivy component, the really dense, deep evergreens that you hit right there in the stream buffer, they are out there and as full force as I've seen in a lot of places, so that component is out there. Some of you may be asking, you know, what's the harm in it? What are they doing there? They're on the bank, they're doing something, and it's a big picture consideration where the amount of good, high-value habitat in the city is dwindling and continues to dwindle every day with development. So this project gives you the opportunity to take your park and make it sort of a beacon of native habitat for, you know, there may be bird watchers out there, you may be pollinator enthusiasts, and what you're lacking when you have a high density of invasives are lots of native migratory songbirds and things like bees, butterflies, sort of your charismatic pollinators that are out there. So that's the situation on the ground that you know I saw from my survey last week. I am currently working on mitigation plans to include in the feasibility study.
Thank you, Brian, I do appreciate it. Okay, so with that, we will start with questions and answers.
Thank you. I hate to say this, but I have had it. I have had it with the Conservancy and the approach they've been taking over the last 4 years of feeding us, mesmerizing us with siren songs.
I'd like to ask a question.
And
Q&A.
I am making a statement and then I'm going to leave the room. Okay. I have worked for 45 years to protect this park and preserve it in its natural state as a haven for us and a refuge for wildlife, and now you're going to ruin it. I weep for Atlanta Memorial Park. I weep for the neighborhoods surrounding the park, and I weep for all of us. So congratulations, you have won, the park has lost, and I quit. Goodbye.
Yes, sir.
I know there's a lot of controversy about some aspects of what may or may not happen,
Sure.
but when it comes to what you're talking about the flora, sorry.
Yeah.
What's the long-term maintenance plan?
Oh, actually, there is a long-term maintenance plan, and that is part of the mitigation. We, as part of this native system restoration, it's not just a one-time deal. It is a 3 to 5 year program. You can't just go in and just remove stuff and just pray that it doesn't come back. You can't do it, it doesn't work. And talking with several environmentalists and forestry experts, we have to do it over a 3 to 5 year period, and that is included in the cost estimate and in our approach. So yes, there is maintenance involved.
Are you talking about mitigation of invasives or removal of invasives? And, you know, I understand you're talking about it takes time. But what is your goal? Removal or just a mitigation?
Well, our goal is to try to remove as many invasives as possible. And Brian, you're the expert on this. You can talk more, please.
So,
Yeah.
It is not a cut and dried, everything's removed, it's clean, it's empty, and then we come in and we put in what would normally natively be growing there. It is I don't want to say a messy process, but it is a doing it at the same time process where you're coming in from one angle with removal of targeted species at certain times of year to clear out a certain niche in the forest, and you're coming in pretty hard on the heels of that, sometimes simultaneously with a replacement, because as most restorationists have learned in the past 50 years, you take something out, nature affords a vacuum, something's going to come back in, and if all your seed source in the area is more privet or more ivy, that's what you will get. So the replanting component, it's reestablishing a seed source that may be completely gone, that may be weakened, and at the very least you are opening back up a niche. So let's say, good example, privet completely dominating the shrub layer in the understory, so you wouldn't have anything like a native deciduous azalea in there, you would not have sweet shrub, you would not have elderberry, and probably don't even have seed sources for those in the park. So that's kind of the two-pronged process that's going on at the same time.
Thank you, Brian.
I'm a master gardener, so I'm interested in plants. So like on the stream bank, so what would plants would go in lieu of what's there now?
That would be almost entirely because of the erosion factor, a live staking process, which is dormant cuttings of wetland plants that you actually drive into the bank without digging because of the sort of situation in the bank. And it would be species, depending, I haven't done a species list yet, but what we typically live stake are elderberry, chokeberry, buttonbush, and various types of willow. And the idea is you put them in their dents and they hold the bank in lieu of cuts of what have
Sounds
you.
better.
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay, sure.
One is the tree replacements, what is their maturity?
I'm sorry?
What is the maturity of the replacement trees? Are they little saplings, or are they gonna have?
Oh, no, they will be at least 3-inch caliber, yes. And when I say 3-inch caliber, that's like a 16-foot tall tree,
Okay,
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be comparable to what's been planted in the park in the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
few years, if you've seen any of those that have gone in. I mean,
Okay.
probably
Yeah.
15, 16 feet.
thank you. I live
Sure.
on Woodward Way, and there are sections of Woodward Way that cannot possibly sustain a 5-foot wide path without killing tree roots. There's no way.
Okay, so here's the deal. There is a way, actually. There are proven measures out there. We do it every day. And, Chris, I don't know if you wanna kind of
Did you
explain the
consider
whole-
cutting into the road? Why didn't you narrow the road?
No. Don't do that.
We can't narrow the road. I'm gonna tell you
Why not?
exactly how we do this, and it is a proven process. And I don't know, Chris, do you wanna
Yeah.
talk about the root bridging that
Root-
goes on?
Bridging essentially, so if you're putting in a concrete sidewalk, it needs something to support it underneath it. Root bridging, you either use piers or some sort of aggregate base, similar to the aggregate trail,
Yeah.
that would disperse the load of the sidewalk in a manner that the roots can continue to sustain their environment beneath that without damaging the roots. You'd come up a little bit. It's utilized, frequently. It's pretty much an industry standard, and it can be, like I said, either a piered system where you would be drilling in piers, or an aggregate base that just supports that and disperses the load over the roots.
And this is something that we do every day in our urban environments with large historic trees. We have the experience of doing it, and I can promise you, we're not killing trees.
Okay, and then also you're putting in concrete. Has anybody gone to see Woodward Way this week? Concrete is not porous. We were flooded.
No, we understand that, and part of this curb improvement will help to mitigate that stormwater drainage. When it comes to floods like this, I mean, you're gonna have floods. However, I will tell you, the concrete sidewalk is a great material within that floodplain. You know, you're not gonna have washouts like you would with the mulch that's out there now. It's a durable product. Unfortunately, we can't put concrete within stream buffers.
I'm talking about the street was flooded and filled with sewage.
Right.
I'm not talking about the park.
And we
and-
understand that,
Well, and that's an issue, that's a city of Atlanta
Right.
issue. The city of Atlanta doesn't have a storm water, plan. We're starting to talk about it tomorrow, and, as I
After
said
the
to you.
horses out of the barn.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, as I said at the outset, the city has been hyper-focused on this consent decree, and they're 99% done with it, and, everybody's happy with that. And during that time frame, the department did not focus on things like the stormwater drainage system, our water pipes and maintenance, and our fire hydrants, and you know that, because you drive around the city, you see all this stuff leaking, and we have big rains, and all the old stuff breaks, because the city hasn't been maintaining the infrastructure for years. And so the, curbs will help drive the water
So the grading will be changed?
We're not necessarily changing the grades of the street. You're in a floodplain, okay? We can't prevent floods in a floodplain, but what we can do is help to mitigate the water and unfortunately sewage that runs down the street, doesn't run into the park. You've got a stable curb that we're putting back, that's not washed out, and we're doing a little bit of root bridging, which is gonna raise it up just a little bit more.
Sewage is coming from the sewage outlets in the park.
Yeah, we understand.
So
Yeah.
it's not running down the street from nowhere
And
else.
we, and I'm just using that as an example, but we understand where the sewage is coming from.
The ecological preservation,
Sure.
the interior paths, I think is terrific. We long need that.
Okay.
I'm having trouble understanding, half of your budget, 200,000 plus 300,000, have to do with the 5-foot wide path and the curbing.
Mm-hmm.
As a frequent walker, my physician has a program called Walk with the Doc,
Sure.
where we come and we walk all the way around Saturday mornings. Part of Walk with the Doc is the socializing, and we normally walk 3 to 4 wide, which means we can only walk on the street. The 5-foot path, for most people, will do nothing. Nobody's gonna walk on a 5-foot path. If you're gonna walk solo, you're gonna walk on a 2 or 3 foot path as it is now. If you wanna walk with friends, we walk on the street, so we can walk side by side and talk. So to spend half of the budget, I'm just questioning the budget here. To spend half of the budget on a gigantic sidewalk all the way around, which will block the flow of the water out of the street back into the park. I'm just wondering, what is the rationale for a 5-foot wide sidewalk and curbing, spend half of your money on that? It's not that ecological, it's just a concrete path.
So are you saying that we should make it a larger sidewalk?
No, I'm saying not spend it at all, save $500,000, spend it on something else. We don't need a sidewalk around the park.
That's not very responsible. You
Well,
can't-
let's make it a
you
park,
can't
we don't
require
need
people to
it.
walk in the streets.
They can walk all the interior paths, that your trails that you're making.
Honestly.
No, I like sidewalks. I like to walk away from the cars and not in the street. And if you
Right.
wanna walk in the street, that's fine, you're welcome to do that, but my next door neighbor has 2 wheelchair-bound children,
Yes.
and they shouldn't be forced to
Yeah.
be in the street. They
Right.
should be allowed a sidewalk.
Right.
And
They
there's
don't
parts of
have
this
to
park
walk.
they've never been to.
Okay.
Yep, and
My
that's-
point is it worth spending half of the budget
is.
on that?
It
Are
is.
there better ways to spend? Well, let's look at the audience. You need to do a market survey. How many walkers have you interviewed? How many users of the park have you interviewed?
Honestly, we've gotta make these trails ADA accessible, in addition to protecting the
Understand,
environment.
but engineers draw projects from the inside. When do they think about the users?
Oh.
And who are the actual users of this park?
And what are you gonna do about the hill from Howell Mill going down into the meadow before it goes back in, which is so steep that no wheelchair can take that?
Right.
We understand there are certain constraints that, are existing that we can't change. There are certain constraints, however, we can do our very best to provide for a ADA accessible trail, provide for a variety of user types, get people out of the streets, give people the option to get out of the streets.
Right.
That's, yes, it's responsible approach to design. And, we're not engineers, we're landscape architects. We take the environment and the engineering and the architecture and put it all together. We think about the human side of things in addition to the environmental, as well as economic. That is our design philosophy, and it always has been.
Can I give a little perspective on the budget?
Sure.
How many miles is that again? Is it 2
All right.
point something?
So we have, along the perimeter of the park, it's a mile, and then the interior is a mile. So we're building 2 miles total of park trails within this park.
Just to give you a perspective, Chastain Park, they're putting in 1 mile along Powers Ferry. And the budget is $1.3 million. I
Right.
mean, it just, and, we're putting in sidewalks on Hell Mill.
Yeah.
Under a mile. It's, $300,000 for 5 feet sidewalk. So these sidewalk projects, I mean, being new, I've only been on council for 5 years, it's pretty eye-popping, but those are
Exactly.
the numbers.
My point, it's exactly 1.8 miles all the way around, because I measure, I walk it all the time. 1.8 miles of concrete path, either you have severely underestimated your 500,000.
No, we haven't.
Well, I mean, she just
Well,
said that,
well, Chastain had to move, they had to move all the power lines. You're so lucky you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
They do that, they had topography that was
Yeah.
challenging. They also had to move a stone wall, so that added to the cost. But I did wanna point out that, how those sidewalks on Hell Mill will be intersecting with this too, because there aren't sidewalks right there by
Correct.
Woodley and everything, right? That's where the gap is?
yeah.
Okay.
There's a
No,
sidewalk
it's
there.
further down.
Yes.
There is a sidewalk.
Existing sidewalk already.
But-
That's part of the ones that
No,
they made.
It goes all the way down about a mile.
But there's a gap, And
It's
that
the map,
gap's gonna
that's
be-
further than
Right, but
towards
that gap is gonna be
August.
filled, so in other words, people could walk from your neighborhood, you'd be able to
That's
walk
correct.
from your neighborhood all the way to, Howell Mill and Collier,
correct.
if you wanted to go grab a pizza or something, so it'll be really cool, because both on the east and the west sides, you'll be able to walk places, I mean, beyond just the park, so the sidewalks aren't just connecting you to the park, they're connecting you really to the entire neighborhood and your friends to the west side safely, which I find, you know, it's been a long time since I've had a little one in strollers, but long time. But I do remember in all the places I've lived, it's been really important in terms of connecting with your neighbors. I mean, I think a sidewalks is, they're a place. They're not they're made out of concrete, yes, but they're a place where a lot of stuff happens. A lot of interaction with neighbors. When I go to Chastain Park and walk, which is a mile from my house, I see so many people, and we do business, you know, we talk about stuff, and it's just, I think, a really exciting way to connect with people you live with and meet new people too, and their doggies.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, I think in Chastain, I count, every time I go on a walk, and there's usually about, 8 dogs for every 11 people. So it's very, I don't know, I find it very
Let me get the
dynamic.
gentleman in the back, he has a big
Our park versus Chastain.
Sure.
Chastain, you got nice big wide sidewalks. Nobody walks that in our park. We want 5-foot
Yeah,
sidewalks.
I understand.
But I think what's gonna happen is we put the sidewalks in, more people are gonna come to enjoy the park. We're constrained with, right now, cars parking along the street. So now we've got more cars parking on the street, and the same amount of people walking on the street, because people do that, just like this gentleman over here. We have more people on the sidewalks. So living on Wesley, I'm concerned that we're gonna have more crowds, more cars parked, more people, that's gonna take away from us enjoying the park.
Right.
We're inviting everybody else to come enjoy the park, so that's, I don't know if that's, who's on what side of that, but living in the park, that's not a warm feeling for me. And the other side question I had, it's a 5-foot sidewalk, you did say, excuse me, something about the bikes not, how are you gonna keep the bikes off the sidewalk, because that's a safety hazard
Well,
too.
We're not, you can't prevent bikers from riding
They
the
don't
sidewalk,
naturally go
however, let me tell you, I mean, it's a 5-foot wide sidewalk.
They'd rather be in the room.
Those bikers, they're serious, they wanna be in the road, you know?
Can I just comment on a parking note, because what's interesting to me, and you can talk to your neighbors, because I don't live down here, but talk to your neighbors, well, Roger's here. Since Tanyard Creek and all this park system has been built down here, is there more parking going on, or do people walk to Tanyard Creek? Because I've come down to walk
There's a
down
lot
here.
of parking.
There is a lot of parking.
A lot of parking to
It's
walk.
increasing.
Okay, and so, do you believe, I guess you don't believe that there'll be disbursement because there are so many
No,
choices?
this guy's right. I mean,
Okay.
this
So
thing's
you
gonna be
are
spruced
experienced.
up, and there's gonna be more parking in the
Okay.
street.
But
Okay.
isn't the park for the city?
Yeah, it is the city.
It's a city park. It's not a one-down park. I mean, it doesn't matter who comes in.
We
I don't
live,
understand that.
we live where
That's the
Woodland
critical
gets
issue.
into
The
Wesley,
city should pay for the sidewalks.
and
This will.
we overlook that whole, southwest corner. Right, yeah.
Right
And-
here?
Yes, and I work from home most Fridays. Generally speaking, there might be 1 or 2 cars parked on Wesley between our house and, Mr. Whitney left, but his house is up by that, up a little bit more.
parking signs.
So, no, so there's
Yes, sir.
ample room for more parking right there, and when we bought in the neighborhood about 10 years ago, my wife and I actually talked about the foot traffic
Yeah.
and parking, and she was concerned about it, and I said, I'm not concerned about it because that's built-in neighborhood watch.
Yeah.
And we have had people who have called 911 because someone was smoking marijuana in a car. Now, we still have people who leave their laptop on the front seat of the car and go for a run and expect to come back and find it. So there's some broken glass in the street as well. But there's room for more people, and as a person who overlooks the park, it's a city park. Now, do I want parking on both sides of the street all the time? no. But, you know, there's plenty of room on our side anyway.
Well, that's a good question. What, is there gonna now be parking on both sides of the street?
We're not improving the street itself. We are not making parking improvements to this project. This is a walkways and drainage.
In front of our house, there is the ability to park on both sides of
Well,
the
I
street.
think what you want to picture is the congestion that you have in front of the playground, okay?
Yes.
Picture that, after school on a weekend, and that's what you can picture from north side to Howell Mill, and then beyond as the park becomes more popular. I'm just, you know,
If I
painting
could-
what I view as the reality of the future of when all these wonderful.
Get people out in parks, though?
I don't view that as congestion.
If I could actually, if you don't mind, I'm gonna mention just about that, because I live on Murphy Road, and a number of years ago, we built the Ellsworth Park Playground. Originally, that was just a weedy hillside, so nobody was coming to that little section. And several people in our neighborhood were very concerned about parking, that it was gonna bring hordes of people to this playground. Well, if you go by Ellsworth Park Playground today, people are walking there, they're enjoying it. It has not created what people were afraid of. And I don't think that this would, because again, we're talking about 5-foot sidewalks. On the other side, there is the multi-use path.
Right.
So I think,
But Ellsworth, the little playground, we're talking about a 38-acre.
Yeah, but we are talking about a 5-foot wide sidewalk. You know, that's what we're talking about.
Excuse me, I would really like to ask,
Yes,
change the
sure.
subject here. I want to talk about these interior trails. First of all, we've been promised all along that that's not gonna happen. We've been told that repeatedly, that they were gonna leave the interior of the park alone. Now, every 5 or 6 years, we go through this with people wanting to pave the park, and they come up with pervious surfaces. The problem is, whenever there's a flood, or just from normal wear, those surfaces get filled up, the pores get filled up, and they're no longer pervious. And they require maintenance, and who's gonna do the maintenance? And you are not putting it on top of sand, you're putting it on red clay, which is not very pervious to begin with. So who's gonna keep cleaning it every few months and every time there's an event?
Well, as part of this effort, the City of Atlanta Parks Department has been involved in this project from day one. So there will be some maintenance involved to that. And, you know, just like any sort of tree care, there's maintenance. Tree care, there's tree care maintenance.
But, you know, you bring up a good point. It's not gonna be any more pervious than the surface that is there right now, which is, as you commented,
Compacted clay.
compacted clay.
Yeah.
We just don't wanna make something less pervious. So, I mean, there's nothing we can do about the land that's there. But it's a surface that works with what's there.
Right, and I will say, with talking with the Roswell Operations Director with that material, they spend hardly any money on maintenance on those improvements. I mean, it's not a high maintenance material, it's very low maintenance considering the eroded, root laden, mulched paths that you have out there now. It is a stable surface and it withstands floods. It is the most appropriate product, for the interior.
We were promised that wasn't going to happen. You did,
It's gonna
yes.
cover it. And subsequent rains aren't gonna wash it out. On the street in Wellesley, where this last week, it was inundated with mud.
Right,
Given enough normal rains after that, most of that mud will get washed off. But in these interior paths, there's not gonna be any natural drain across that's gonna flush fresh water across that's gonna clean it off. They're gonna stay muddy even well after the rains have subsided.
well, I will say that rain, you know, nature has a way of fixing itself and correcting itself, and as it continues to rain on the park, it will cleanse itself. I mean, I see it every day at the park that I visit every day. It is the right application.
Is there borders on that when you
There are
lay?
no borders, it's all natural, yeah, sure.
Is there any lighting plan for this?
No, we are not doing any lighting improvements on this project, no lighting improvements.
I've always heard that the Environmental Protection Agency forbid putting any impervious surfaces in the floodplain, not just the buffer, but in the floodplain. And how do you propose to get around those restrictions?
It's called an encroachment permit, and, I believe Joe, there you are. Hi, Joe.
Hey.
He is our civil engineer, and he's the one that has the most experience with the EPD, and he could probably talk on behalf of improving within floodplains and those materials.
So, kind of going off of, I don't remember who made the comment, but about the hard compacted clay. Basically, it's a submittal of variance, requesting a change from their norm. And so one of the justifications is that it's an existing trail. The location of the trail is ideal because it's kind of at the high point. It is a floodplain. There's lower areas on either side of the trail that pond. So to move it from its current location causes additional complications. Another justification is the hard packed clay. It's already essentially an impervious surface at this point, so we really are not changing the hydraulic content of the area, but it's all part of the process with the EPD.
So, and you think you have an argument with them that would allow you to do it?
Yeah, we think that it's a justifiable argument. We also met with the City of Atlanta's Department of Watershed Management to kind of talk through the process and talk through our ideas, and they thought that we had a justifiable claim, but compared to recent successful projects that they've had.
Yes.
When you put the 5-foot concrete sidewalk around the park, have you determined how many trees will be
Yes.
condemned under the Atlanta City tree ordinance, because the critical root zone is being impacted by the concrete? And so what that's really saying is that the tree's there, but the city's gonna deem it to die in the near future, and therefore you've gotta come in with recompense trees, and where will you plant those recompense trees?
Okay.
Have you done that
Oh,
accounting?
absolutely, absolutely.
What have you found?
Okay, what we have found is with the root bridging technique that we use on a daily basis for all projects is an acceptable application that does not impact, zero impacts to the critical root zone. And so that's what I was telling you earlier, is that our proposed plan, our proposed strategy will provide zero impacts to the existing roots. We are removing 5 trees that are in poor condition, but those trees are in poor condition. And in my opinion, in my professional opinion, those trees are considered a hazard. So it makes sense. So yes, we've talked with the City of Atlanta arborist in great detail. We've walked the site with him. We spent the 5 hours plus, at the kickoff meeting, and then several other meetings after that.
You mean the city arborist or the Parks Department or arborist?
We've talked to the Parks Department arborist, we've talked to our city project arborist, and it's been determined that we are going to create zero impacts to these trees that are in good condition.
Can you tell us where those are?
Yeah, absolutely.
The example parks that you mentioned earlier, do they have this technique done where we could see a sidewalk that's been in 5 years and?
Oh, yeah. Actually, that's.
In terms of Tanyard Creek and root bridging, when the Beltline Trail went through Tanyard Creek, all of that is root bridged, especially near the playground section there. I know all of that has been root bridged, and that's been in 6 or 7 years at this point, and all of that was to not impact those trees.
I don't know, Steve, the root bridge, did any root bridging take place in the Avondale Estates? Okay. Okay, so this is a list of the trees that are in poor condition, and this is part of our tree survey that we are removing. We're removing a 9-inch honey locust. So again, it's got dieback in the canopy. It's leaning over the road, multi-stem. It's got 50% deadwood. It's in poor condition.
Do you know where?
Yes, I do. I've got them on this map here, and it'll just take me a minute to actually go through and find those. But we've got a map prepared, and I mean, it's just scattered about. But I got those located on the plan. That's how I determined that we are indeed removing 5 trees that are in poor condition out of over 800 specimen trees.
Are you putting this whole report online so that we can all look at
Yeah,
it?
the report will be available once it's approved by the Parks Department. They want to approve the plans before we make it public.
Well, we'd like to see it
Which is
before it's
when?
approved so that we can make comments on it.
You have to approve the bill so that we can read what's in it.
Yes, thank you.
So, you know, we can certainly look at that, you know, as an option. I mean,
Well, when is it gonna be approved? Next year?
no, we
Year
have
after?
we have a meeting scheduled next week with the Parks Department, and we're gonna go over that report. And after we go over that report with the Parks Department, we will either make edits to that report, or we will post that report. And we're trying to be as transparent as possible.
And it's only approving a feasibility study.
And it's the
not-
feasibility
Right.
study that's being approved.
And the
Yes,
city has its own public process too.
absolutely.
So this is the concern.
How does this project relate to the one, by the way, your company did a horrible disservice to those of us who live on Overflow Drive with the platform courts and their placing it next to homes. You guys are also proposing a huge 400-car parking garage and a driving range. How does those projects tie into this? Is this really a standalone project?
This is a standalone project, purely a standalone project. I
And
promise
it's
that.
being assessed separately from those other projects that
That
you
is correct.
proposed?
That is correct.
What does
This
that
is
mean?
a project that has been funded by the Park Pride. We've got a grant to do the feasibility study. It's a thorough study.
Who funds Park Ride?
It's a nonprofit.
Park Pride is a separate nonprofit entity. It has its own 501c3. It's an independent organization that is funded by the public at large and is vetted daily.
Not city money?
No.
What does that
It
mean?
is separate from the city. It was actually created to try and address the lack of
Private
support being
donations?
provided by the city's Parks and Rec
You could
Department.
donate to Park Pride.
The Park Pride was
Could I see
really
everybody
a sort of
that's
like white
donated?
flag saying, hey, let's don't lose what little we have left.
That's not, that would be transparent.
I just
We'll
want
go
to
to their
clarify
website
that I'm
and see.
understanding something
It may
that
be
you
on the
said.
website.
Yeah.
You get their
The
99.
feasibility study
Yes,
hopefully will be approved very soon, but that
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean the project's gonna happen. It just means the study
that's
has
the
been
study.
approved.
That's correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we have to have the study, the Park Department needs to approve the study before we make it available. We
What will
wanna
that
make sure-
mean, they've approved the study? They just said,
Except
we
for the
approve of
study.
your study, or does that mean we agree with what you've come up with?
Well, they ultimately have to agree with what we're proposing. So-
And then it's a done deal?
Yeah, then you have to go through construction documents, and you have to go through all the permitting.
Right.
It's a very long
It's a
process.
lengthy
It's
process.
basically saying that
And the city has its own public process following this, so what happened with Chastain is once they hired the consultants, then the report gets turned over to the city, and the city has to approve the design. The design has to meet
Yeah.
all their standards.
Separate.
And then there's a public process after that. So this is the beginning.
Yes.
So
It's
this
not the middle and it's not the end, this is the beginning.
Yeah, so
is
this
the first
feasibility
step.
study gets approved, bulldozers don't show up.
No,
Okay?
it's saying.
I just wanna make sure that that's clear.
It's
No.
saying that the study complies with all the rules and all that sort of stuff. It says it complies with the flood rules and the building rules and the road rules and all that sort of stuff. So it's just taking their work and saying, you did a good job or not. And sometimes it goes back and forth. It's very lengthy.
Yeah, just a comment that I'd like to make is that I've lived within a block of the park for 48 and a half years. Was within a block of it for 9 months before that when I was in the womb. And during that period of time, as an avid runner, an avid dog walker, and for the last 9.5 years, an avid child walker, I've used the park, either the entire thing or some portion of it, more days than not. And something that's of particular importance to me is the point in time when I had twins in a stroller, a 2-year-old by the hand. It just sickened me
that we had to walk around most of the park in the street because the trail cannot accommodate a stroller. And when it's muddy, you don't want your kids' feet in the mud, your own feet in the mud. You don't want to be tripping over roots and rocks. And anything that will get my kids out of the street is something that I'm very much in favor of. And I'll also point out that when I'm on Peachtree Battle or on Howellville or on that trail that connects along Northside Drive, there are people not out in the road. There are people on the sidewalk using that sidewalk. And I have every confidence that if we get this trail around the rest of the park, it's gonna be the same way there. Unless people are adults and they're stupid enough to go out in the road and face the cars on their own.
I was just curious about, the communication between this side and the golf course side. Especially, is there some consideration of, how you would get across, from the park, this Memorial Park to the path at the intersection of Sagamore and Northside Drive?
Okay, so those are future improvements. We are solely studying, our project stays within the boundaries of the limits, west side and north side drive.
GDOT will be improving that.
Yes, GDOT will be doing that as a separate project. We are not involved in the
Is
GDOT.
there anything we can do to design that will make it more feasible to connect with that point?
It's part of the bridge plan already, which is probably gonna happen before any of this anyway. Is that correct? The bridge will be done before any of this happens.
I can't commit to that, I mean, I can't comment on the bridge project.
I hate to ruin your day, it's lousy night anyway, so I might as well tell you. That bridge is gonna be under construction for a long time.
Yeah.
It's about an 18-month project, it hasn't been designed yet. They haven't decided whether they're gonna have a temporary bridge or close the roads, but from the time GDOT starts engaging with you to the time that bridge is done, it will be a good 2 years. So, it's a long ways out.
Yolanda, there is going to be a path foundation trail around the golf course, isn't there? Is that a done deal?
There have been no plans adopted on the other side.
The golf
on the east
course.
side. The plan has been sitting in the Parks Department for 2 years, and nothing's happened with it.
Oh, thank you.
So there is no plan that's been adopted.
Maybe this one won't be.
I'm talking about, that cannot not be put around the park instead, on the outside instead of concrete. My problem with concrete is so hard on runners' knees and my dog's knees. I mean, you know, poor dogs, you know, end up with, arthritis because when I'm gonna walk the dog, I'm not gonna be on the concrete, I'm gonna be walking beside it. Cause I've got problems with my knees also. I mean, concrete is just really hard on all the joints.
Well, I will
Use
say,
the interior trail.
you can use the interior trails, but it is our recommendation for the perimeter, the roadway, park trails, to make that a hard surface.
But it couldn't be an aggregate, and that's not an option.
I mean, that is an option, it is certainly an option. However, our recommendation would be to first see if we can get the hard surface put in place.
Is aggregate less expensive?
Actually, they're pretty close in cost, based on our comparison. Yes.
On Wesley, there's a point right by that orange dot, yeah, right where your finger is. Are they gonna build retaining wall to accommodate the new sidewalk proposed on the east side of the street? Because at that point, there is really no supporting earth structure. It's very steep. Is there a plan to kind of subsidize that such that you'll have a surface for the sidewalk?
We have looked at that area. And is this the same area where there's an existing retaining wall and handrail?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So at that point, at that juncture, we may have to narrow down the sidewalk. Our plan is not to build retaining walls. We certainly are working within the environmental constraints and the space constraints, but we've looked at that area and we are certainly, you know, if it comes down to it in the construction document phase that we do have to rebuild that retaining wall or put in a new handrail, we will certainly add that to our plans.
And just another point, someone mentioned about getting into the street. They actually did narrow the street in front of my house when they put sidewalks in, for this very reason. That the
You're talking about
embankment
for
was,
right in
no,
here?
I'm talking for Peachtree Battle.
Oh, Peachtree Battle,
Yeah,
they narrowed the street.
they actually narrowed the street to accommodate the sidewalk.
Well, in this case, in this project, we are able to accommodate for a sidewalk without having to narrow the street. So at this point in time, our recommendation is to build the sidewalk or improve the existing trail without encroaching within the street.
Wouldn't that be a good place to use the granite curbing or the rubble that you've salvaged to build a beautiful wall there?
What place?
Where you're talking
Oh, the
about,
retaining
could
wall,
you
yes.
use that?
Absolutely, we
rubble,
could use that
stone?
as a veneer for a retaining
I
wall.
have 100 feet of that, I'll donate. You can have it.
Are you doing anything about creek improvement, or there's a little creek which isn't even marked on your map, which is constantly flooded and which causes great
Kind of right,
concern
right
around
in
about
here.
here.
Yeah, in that area as well.
It's a drainage.
It's a, yeah, we are not going in and disturbing that area with the exception of the invasive species removal, which will in turn improve the water quality of your creek by restoring those habitats, restoring that ecosystem.
How will you get rid of the kudzu? I think it would be a anti-foliant to kill it, but I don't think that's allowed by the EPA near a.
Well, I think Brian can probably talk on the kudzu again, cause that's in his expertise.
So you're talking specifically about the kudzu on the banks of the stream. So there are specific herbicides that are listed for use within a riparian buffer, and that's all that would be allowed within that buffer. So there are other chemicals that would be used in different places where it does not come into contact with surface water, but in that situation, you would be constrained by the nearness to water. Watershed would not let us put sheep directly on the bank of a major stream like that, because we have had this dialogue with them in many cases, and they're worried about things like listeria in the water or what have you. So you're really limited, and you're not gonna go in there and pull it on the stream bank either. So the only option on an erodible stream bank like that is a water-safe herbicide.
And there is such a thing.
And there is such a thing.
Okay.